Hello, and welcome to the Star Wars Universe Podcast. Today we're talking about the Clone Wars, the final last season, Season 7, Episode 4. All that and more right after this commercial break we have no control over. Welcome back. My name is Matthew. I'm one of your hosts. I'm joined today by Paul, who's been the co-host with me on this dive through the last season of the Clone Wars. Paul, how are we doing today?
Doing pretty good. I like the final last season.
Yes.
Also. In theory, right?
Yeah.
But this is what, the third last season now?
Yeah, I mean, I thought we'd had a last season, and I'll say actually some more as we get into this, because I did a little research and think I have a better idea now of what happened.
Mm-hmm. That's good.
But just to make it clear for those who are normally follow this because they like the rewatch of The Mandalorian that we're doing, and the rewatch of the Clone Wars, where we started from Episode 1, Season 1. This is not part of that. This is a little bit separate. If you are watching along and have not yet seen the last season, or you just want to wait until you've heard us talk about everything else, those podcasts with myself and Riki and Sarah are continuing to come out every Tuesday, or going back and forth between that and The Mandalorian, and they will continue. This is kind of a special treat we're doing where just for the 8 episodes of the last season of the Clone Wars, we're dropping one episode about once every weekday. Life comes up, so I think we're going to do 4 this week, and that'll be just enough. But so if you enjoy that, please keep listening. If that's not your thing, feel free to hit pause. Wait till Tuesday. The next episode of the other ones will come out. And if you do get to Season 7 at some point, these episodes will be waiting for you, because it's the internet, and nothing ever goes away.
True that is.
So yeah, just on this last season point, I did a little bit of digging. I'm not a huge expert, and if any of our fans know more, please write in and let me know. But as best I can figure out, they had some idea of a story arc planned, and wound up having to cancel after 5 seasons. It got canceled, and probably just because the Star Wars had kind of moved on, and maybe the ratings were not as good, or for whatever reason. But they had written out quite a lot of what was supposed to happen in both Season 6 and in Season 7. And then they kind of got the chance to... And then for a little while, there'd be a couple of weird... they'd put together a couple of episodes that would go up in different formats and in different places. I think a couple of them were, released in theaters as part of, short animation things or things like that. I'm not sure the details. But basically, a lot of the episodes that eventually became Season 6 were released in a couple of different places, and then about 4 to 5 years ago, they put that all into, it may be more like 6 or 7, but they put it all into one place and released it all as Season 6. And in part because at that point they thought they were never going to get to do anything more, they did a pretty thorough ending of that season in a way that ends with the idea that it really is coming right up to the beginning of the 3rd movie and the end of the Clone Wars story. But apparently they, at that time, had written out a lot of what they wanted to do in Season 7, but just didn't think they were going to get a chance to do it. Kind of a lot like what happened with Buffy, where Season 5 seemed like it was a finale, and then, oh wait, you actually get 2 more seasons. It's happened with a couple of other TV shows as well. So I think that's my understanding, and for that reason, I think it's a lot easier for me to forgive that there are parts of this that don't seem to make sense with the revelations that happened at the end of Season 6, and I'm kind of okay just assuming that they haven't, that maybe those things happen out of order. Especially because when I went back and really looked at it, most of those first 5 seasons do not happen in chronological order.
Right.
As far as I can tell, and granted, this was it's funny to say this about a show that came out only 10 years ago, but the degree of fan deep diving was just nothing like it is today at that point, as well as the fact that it was a kids show. My understanding is that a lot of times what they would do is they'd write a plot line, and then they'd be like, okay, well, what should we write? We need to fill 4 more episodes. What should we do? And then someone would say, oh, you remember that cool thing that was happening 3 seasons ago? Let's go back to that and tell another story at that point. And so they go back and tell a story that's not at all chronologically connected.
Right.
And they never put, star dates and anything, so we have no idea when it actually fits. But yeah, that's my long soliloquy, but that's my at least understanding of how this all fits together.
Well, so I did less digging, but a similar sort of thing. And somewhere I saw that this season it was aired out of order, and so the episode list on Disney Plus or whatever is also essentially out of order. chronologically. Yeah, so I saw that just before we were going to do episode 1, so I was thinking, like, should we do them in the chronological order, or should we do them in the order in which they were released, and thus the order most people are going to watch them on the streaming service? Like, would people rather hop around, and I don't know. I think that it's probably better to just do it this way in terms of sort of ease of use for people. But it's sort of like trying to watch the Marvel movies in chronological order or something,
right.
you know?
Yeah, we actually had that exact same discussion when we started the whole Clone Wars rewatch part of the podcast for exactly that same reason. And we came to the conclusion pretty much exactly what you said, is like, I'm sure that there are people who are watching the Clone Wars or watched it in the past and enjoy listening to this podcast about it.
Right.
I think the number of people who are going to fundamentally change the way they watch something in order to follow along with us.
Right.
I love the idea. I think that might be a bit hubristic.
A little bit. Not quite there.
But then again, for anyone who wants to watch it in the right order, and in the chronological order, and then will, listen to these episodes in that order, please feel free. We should have it all wrapped up by the end of next week.
Yeah.
I will say that my understanding,
like 12 or 13.
Say again?
You said earlier that it was 8 episodes. Is it 8 or is it like 12 or 13?
I thought for some reason it was 8. I could be wrong. Let me quickly look that up. If so, I am planning badly, and a couple other things might need to get adjusted.
Right. It's a little bit more of a project than I originally thought. It was like 5 episodes that were out so far, but and then
I've been kind of scheduling some other podcasts based on the idea of like, okay, this was fun, but doing this much was kind of insane, and I'm going to get my life back in 8 episodes. So yeah, that might change some things. Looking that up quickly now, trying not to get spoiled by it. Yep, there's 12 episodes. Okay. So I think folks, realistically, we're going to shoot for, if we get 4 episodes a week, we're going to be very happy. We might get 3 episodes some week just because life happens, and I'm sure that's going to be okay.
Yeah, it'll be, and these 4 episodes certainly, I mean, maybe we'll try to avoid spoilers, like specific spoilers from earlier in the season if you do watch them out of order,
right?
Which is actually in order, but you know,
and I will say that
these 4 are in order.
I got a little bit spoiled, and I'm not going to reveal that.
No.
My understanding though is that at least the end of this season is chronologically the end of it chronologically. So at least like we are building to an ending of some kind, as I understand it.
I hear Anakin turns to the dark side at some point.
God damn it, man. Don't tell me these things.
Yeah. I think he has a kid or something or 2. Or yeah.
All right. Well, if you're going to spoil things, I'm going to spoil Obi-Wan lives.
Oh, drat.
Exactly.
There goes the suspense.
Yeah. All right. Well, anyway, we are supposed to be talking about this episode.
Right.
And so let's get into it. And I feel like, once again, this is an episode where, from our perspective at least, I mean, it's enjoyable and it's a nice telling of further story. I felt like I had 2 very different moods about this episode. On the one hand, there was a feeling of, okay, I guess that's the end of the Echo story, and it wasn't anything that I wanted it to be, and that's kind of disappointing. On the other hand, we get an Anakin moment that shows him moving towards Darth Vader in a way that nothing in the prequel movies ever. Like, if you just, I have a colleague who has said it many times that like, he doesn't understand how Anakin goes from being like the somewhat rebellious Jedi to I'm willing to kill younglings. Right. And honestly, just that one scene of him, like, we'll get into, but of him basically like torturing and then pretty much murdering and then leaving to die painfully, the enemy admiral, like, I think that says more about it than anything in the movie.
It pretty much sums it up, you know, and the Clone Wars series, I wouldn't say builds specifically to that moment, but it builds his character in a way where when that moment happens, you're like, of course that's what he did, you know, whereas right at the end of like the Attack of the Clones, is that like if he did something like that, you'd be like, whoa. Like,
yeah, where did this come from?
Yeah.
And I think it's a really, you know, earlier in the Clone Wars, there's an episode where, and I didn't catch this at first, the person who I'm doing this podcast with, one of the 2, Riki, he caught this on his second watch, and then when he pointed it out to me, I definitely noticed it. There's a couple of moments, and I think one of the first of them is in season 2, where Anakin starts to do something you're like, okay, that's not really kosher with the Jedi. Like, you're kind of going off the end a little bit. And there's just the faintest bit of the Darth Vader theme in the music.
Oh, yeah.
And I just, this show does such a good job. And I feel like, let's just get right into it. He's dealing with an enemy leader, and he's threatening to torture this person and somewhat torturing them. And that's something that he does a good deal in the show. And I've always been like, that's kind of dark sidey already.
Yeah. I mean, he cuts parts of him off, right? Which may be cybernetic or whatever, but,
Yeah, no, I mean, that's a little more detailed than I think we've seen. And I certainly didn't get the sense that they were cybernetic. I mean, they maybe it was, but he certainly
felt like half of the Admiral's face and whatever body was kind of cybernetic and the other half was organic, but it's a little unclear, I guess.
Yeah. I think that's certainly possible. It certainly did seem for some reason, I don't know if like George Lucas, when he was like 5, saw someone get their hand cut off.
Yeah, no, it's a theme. It's definitely a theme in the whole verse, right?
Yeah,
like, not just like first the movies and then the shows. It's like, yeah,
and for whatever reason
happened.
I have no idea. Like I think my understanding is that the people who wrote this season, this is now completely unconnected to Lucas, even though it's based on ideas he had.
Right.
But they did say they consulted with him on it. But even like in The Mandalorian and like some of the newer movies, people are getting their hands cut off. So it is baked into the DNA of the show, of this story now. Yeah. But to me, even beyond that, like even if you're like, oh, it's a robot, it's not as big a deal. He later starts, talking to one of the other Jedi, and he gets a little distracted, and the Admiral kind of takes advantage of that to shock him. And I feel like I've seen a lot of Jedi be in this situation, and they're just like, no, don't do that. Of course I can kill you. Stop that.
Right. Yeah.
Anakin just, like, impales the guy with his lightsaber.
Right, yeah, and, like, doesn't blink.
Yeah.
And then he's like, oh, look at this little toy that Wrecker's gonna love that will blow up the whole fleet.
Right.
Like, it's like, yeah.
And not even that, but not only that, but, like, if the guy was already 100% stone dead, and then he notices the toy, I'm like, okay, that's terrific, but I'm sort of there. Then as Anakin's walking away from the toy, we see the Admiral, like, fall to the floor, still, like, clutching at life before he dies.
Yeah.
And Anakin offers no sympathy, no compassion, no attempt at healing, just like, yeah, you're done. Like, that was a Punisher-level move right there.
It was very Punisher. I think of Wrecker as being more Punisher, but yeah, it was just straight Vader. It was just like, yeah, I'm done with you. Continue dying. Continue suffering. Whatever. Like, you're no longer of consequence to me. I got what I need from you.
Yeah, and certainly it feels to me like that the Jedi seem to have this ideal of don't care about any individual life, but care about all life and respect all life.
Yeah.
And I think this is a moment where it is clearly showing Anakin no longer feels that. Anakin is now like you just said, like the lives that are important to him are either people he cares about or people he thinks are valuable to him or useful to him.
Yeah.
Other than that, you're done.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so as far as the not caring about individual life, like I feel like Yoda has more of a caring about each life sort of than just collectively. But as far as the Jedi specifically, yeah, there is sort of something along with the kind of dispassionate, like not forming attachments, I think does sort of lead to viewing more collectively as opposed to individually, Yeah. I mean, how can you really appreciate each life without forming some attachment? Like, there's I mean, empathy is an attachment, really. Right.
It is.
Like, it's an emotional attachment to another being.
And I mean, I think the Jedi are pretty. They never use these words, obviously, because it's a different universe. But I think it's supposed to be pretty clear that the Jedi are basically fairly utilitarian. And in a sense of like, if you have the choice between saving one life or saving 1,000, you always save the 1,000. And I think this is pretty explicit. You should never get to a point where you care so much about any one person that it's harder for you that you want to save their life instead of saving the 1,000.
Right, where you're going to prioritize Padme over 1,000 Gungans or whatever.
Right.
Yeah. One other thing about that scene at the end with Anakin, which, I mean, kind of feels like the most consequential, not kind of, I mean, it feels like, to me, like the most consequential scene in the episode. There's a couple others that are, revolving around Echo, which I'd say we'll get to next.
Right.
But like when Anakin enters that room, he's visibly angry.
Yeah.
This isn't just like he's going in and he's just like, well, I'm just going to do whatever I need to do to get that number to disarm the bomb. It's like there's visible rage, and it's on his face, and so he, I'd say, threatens, tortures, and kills the enemy admiral, not in a utilitarian, like, well, if I have to kill this one guy or whatever in order to achieve my ends, so be it. Like, that's one step, right? But he's past that. He's like, it feels like it's what he wants to do.
Yeah. That's actually a great point. And it's the mirror of what we were just saying, because it is its own form of attachment.
Right.
Because now it's not, instead of it being, I care so much about this person that I want to save them, it's, now I am so particularly focused on my negative feelings towards this person that I actively want to kill them, as opposed to just like, the Jedi are not pacifists. The Jedi are willing to kill, but I think it's supposed to be like, I have to kill these people to get my goal, not to, that sounds horrible. But in the self-defense kind of way that they're
to achieve my goal of not being killed. Like, okay,
But no, I think actually that's a great point. That's its own form of attachment, and that motivates him, and it's, I have always said that Star Wars was my first ethical teaching, and for me, the primary lesson that I got out of it from a very early age, and this is, I guess, more from Empire Strikes Back, but was this idea of, that fear and anger and hate lead to the dark side. And, I've always, that's kind of really a core part, I think, still of my life philosophy and theology, this idea that, like, hating something is what makes you is how you start to go down the road of becoming that. Right. And I've, over time, I've adjusted that belief and come to realize, like, there's a lot of privilege to that. And, like, if you want to it's hard for me to say, don't hate the oppressor, like, I get that. But I still feel like there's a lot of truth to it, of, like, the more that you let your hate and your anger and your fear drive you, you start to become the thing you're trying so hard not to be. And I feel like in the original movies, we were told that Darth Vader is the living example of that. And I wanted the prequels to show that. Yeah. And they just did a terrible job. And, like, scenes like this are what makes me feel like this is the Clone Wars doing that. Yeah,
absolutely. And I mean, contrast that with, Mace Windu being basically like, hey, I killed, 100,000 of you droids. Like, you want to give up? No? Okay, I guess we'll kill more of you. But, like, which on the one hand is, like, it seems a little disingenuous, like, because it's like they're obviously not going to surrender, and, like, how much agency do they have in surrendering? I guess they can, right? Like, it's kind of unclear to what extent they're following orders or following programming, but
I honestly thought there was a fairly legitimate chance that they would do it, and
I think that would have been really interesting.
But I felt like, we talked before about how we didn't know much about Mace Windu's character, especially because it's so hard to not just see, Sam Jackson, because Samuel Jackson is such not just a fantastic actor, which he is, but also just such a dominant personality.
He's just so him.
Yeah, exactly.
As much as anyone is themselves, basically.
But, like, that, to me, that moment was so good, because it's like, he has reached a level of arrogance and hubris that goes beyond strutting. Because he's not, I feel like if Anakin said that, it would be braggadocio. It would be like, hey, come on, guys, look how fucking awesome I am.
Right.
Mace Windu is just like, look, there are facts. Water is wet. Sky is blue. I kill you people by the hundreds of thousands. Like, he's just like, let's look at the data. The data says you shouldn't fight me.
Exactly. It paints a picture of this ending one way, and let's face it, it's not a good way for you. So maybe let's just not do this.
And I think part of why I loved it is because, honestly, you get to the point where every time some enemy leader says, okay, we'll send all those droids in, and this time we'll have them. And I think the Admiral says that at some point in this episode. Yeah. You're like, why? What would possibly lead you to that conclusion?
Right, exactly. What in the history of everything that has ever happened leads you to believe that these droid armies are actually going to defeat, these Jedi? And I mean, it's like even worse when like Anakin busts in on him and he's got like 3 droids with him, one of which is like basically not a combat droid, and Anakin just like cuts it in half immediately, and then the other 2 go to try to kill him, and he's like does he really think that that's gonna work, that they're gonna stop him? Like I mean,
yeah, it seems kind of ridiculous. So, but anyway, yeah, I thought that was just a fantastic scene. That it scenes like that's why I like watching this show.
Me too.
Let's get into Echo. And I've been kind of talking a lot, so I'll kind of hand this one over to more to you. What was your take on how the whole Echo storyline seemed to get wrapped up?
I mean, I think again it was a little bit more sort of what I thought was going to happen than what you thought was going to happen, which would have been maybe more interesting. Mm-hmm. But I'll sign on to watch like your headcanon version of the show. But yeah, basically early on there was the whole like, can we trust him? Is he trustable? And it felt like, the Techno Union or the Admiral had some sort of, like, we knew they had some sort of plan that we didn't know about, and we thought maybe has to do with Echo, and it turns out it didn't. It was just like he was going to blow everything up if they got there, which it seems like you maybe wouldn't want like a countdown thing. Maybe you just like press a button and then blow it up, but whatever. Anyway, it sort of was, there was that element of doubt, and then the doubt was alleviated. And actually, when the doubt was alleviated early on in the episode, it made me think that then it was going to, like, double back again. And I guess they did double back with the doubt, and again, it wasn't that. And it turned out that, the thing with Echo's character was that he didn't feel like he belonged where he was before. Because, he had been changed by his experiences and, maybe felt more comfortable with the Bad Batch than with, the rank and file clones.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm definitely with you there. And I came to realize like a big part of my problem is with the damn narrator. Because the narrator... Once again, I felt like there was a big spoiler of... Yes. At the end of the last episode...
I heard it, I was like, oh, Matthew's going to be mad at this.
I really was. And I think it's part of it is I felt like in part the way the narrator framed it was kind of setting me up for that story I thought they were going for. Because, honestly, if I realized that the point of the story wasn't anything about, like, Echo's treachery, it was always just going to be about, is Echo going to be able to, like, fit in again? Or is he going to kind of see the value in this band of misfits? Like... Yeah. That's a great story,
Yeah, it is. Yeah,
and I'm a little annoyed that and maybe I headcanoned myself too hard, but I kind of think I was leaning this. Like, there were just a lot of things that made it seem like it was going to be a different story than it was. But I did think the moment of, the bad batch kind of accepting him and him deciding to go with them, and Rex, respecting and understanding that. Like, I thought that was powerful. Like that certainly
I did too.
It was a nice moment.
Yeah, I agree. It's like it wasn't necessarily the direction that I was expecting or maybe hoping for, but like it was nice. It worked. It's like overall, I'd look at the 4-episode arc and say like, yeah, it was a nice story that had, had some good moments. I almost wish that there was less of the sort of doubt about what Echo's loyalty, that wasn't leaned into so heavily, because maybe the other story is more interesting if you give it more space,
right?
And maybe it didn't have enough air because there was too much about like, oh, is he going to betray us? Is he on our side? Is he programmed this way or whatever? As opposed to just like, yeah, what's up with this guy? Like, he's been through some shit.
Yeah, I also wonder if this is a moment where, like I said, a lot of this seems to have been written many years ago, and then they kind of like pulled those scripts out of the archives, dusted them off, and then added some things.
Yeah.
And here I wonder if like the original story was kind of going in one way and they added some things that took it in a new direction. And so that's why it just seems like it doesn't all quite fit cohesively.
Definitely possible. And I mean, I think it's tremendously hard to take a show that was successful it actually might be more difficult with a show that was unsuccessful. But you take a show that people have some attachment to, and attachment to it being a certain way, and then years later you come back and you try and tell more of the story. It's like not even just retelling the story in a new way, but actually telling more story, kind of picking up where you left off. And most of the things that have done that, I have not been particularly happy with. I mean, I've almost always been like disappointed with how it was when it came back. I'd say overall they've done a good job of a difficult situation, where with animation it's probably a little easier because at least all the characters can look the same if you want them to.
Right.
It's difficult when actors change and all these things, but
although I'd actually say even with the animation, this is something I was noticing, and I went back to watch an old episode just to make sure I wasn't like making this up. Yeah. Animation has changed a lot just in the last 10 years, and like there's new technology and there's new techniques, and I feel like and the animation of the old show was like, it was good, but it was obviously very, I mean, it looks fairly dated now when you go back and watch it, and I feel like they made a very conscious effort to stick to that animation style. And
I agree.
Like the lines are
differences, but
so, there's differences. It feels like it's been improved somewhat, but it feels like it's an evolution, not a change.
Right.
And I really appreciate that they did that, because I think it would have been very easy to, like, this is something that gets talked a lot about by Star Trek fans. Like the problem with a lot of science fiction, and Star Trek especially is when you tell a science fiction story at a particular day and time, you're imagining the future through what you can imagine. And so like,
right.
Up until like the 1970s, in the original TV show, like they imagined that space would have crazy computers that would be monochromatic.
Right.
Because it just never occurred to them that it wouldn't. And like the bridge of the Star Trek Enterprise has gotten so much cooler over the years as it's being told in ways that don't make sense. But yeah, so
especially if they're telling a prequel or something. It's why is the technology better earlier?
Yeah, like I'm currently watching Star Trek Enterprise, and it's a much better show than what I thought it was the first time I watched it. But they clearly have technology that did not appear anywhere on the original series.
Right. Yeah.
And it just looks all better. Anyway, I think that's about all I have from this episode. Anything more you want to get into?
No, that's about it. I mean, I kind of want the narrator to actually be a character at some point. Oh,
he is. It's Admiral. It's Admiral Valoran.
Oh, it is. Okay. Yeah. Well, I sort of feel like all of the different series and movies are like different takes on what happened by like different groups.
Yeah.
Like that the original trilogy is basically like propaganda from like the Rebel Alliance, and
I kind of like that.
I don't know. I saw a really interesting interpretation of the original trilogy, but or the different trilogies of movies, but I do feel like the Clone Wars is it feels sort of like Old Republic propaganda in a way.
Yeah.
Through a lot of it, I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's definitely true, and I certainly feel like it feels like in the Clone Wars that they were aware of that, and they were trying to say like this is kind of like a newsreel that would be put out by Republic, news force, and it is meant to be kind of propaganda, and that like that the Admiral's voiceover is supposed to be an unreliable narrator.
Yeah,
I certainly don't think they ever established that in terms of like the yellow text that scrolls.
No.
Which is a little frustrating because it's some of the most purple prose you can ever, like, I go back and watch it, I'm like, oh god, like, do you have to like put in all caps the name of just how evil and villainous everything is?
It's true.
Yeah. All right. Anyway, Paul, any other last things you want to get on, or can we wrap up?
No, I'm good.
Cool. All right. Well, thank you so much. As always, this was great. If you're listening, please write in. We'd love to hear what you're thinking. On Twitter, on Facebook, on email, it's always Star Wars Universe. I need to actually, I'm going to be actually, I think, changing the names around a little bit so it's easier to kind of find all them. But you can find them on the links is the easiest place to find them. By searching by Star Wars Universe Podcast, you should be able to find it. But the links are in the show notes. That's the best way. Let us know what you're thinking. Let us know how you're feeling about this new season so far. Are you loving it? Are you not loving it? What's your take so far? Do all that. We'd love also, and if you think this is going well, drop a review for us on iTunes or anywhere else. It's a great way to let us know what we're doing well or what we could do better. And it's also a great way to help making sure that other people can find this podcast and be part of the conversation. So, Paul, thank you to all your listeners. Thank you all very much. Have a great day.